Tansei, I'm Krisanachkate. Welcome to APTN National News. Thank you for joining us. Manitoba Hydro says it's continuing to assist York Factory First Nation during low water levels in Split Lake that has caused persistent drought conditions and shut down the local ferry service there. We start off with this brief report. On Thursday, Manitoba Hydro says it has made 6 boats along with operating staff available to help transport people and supplies to and from York Factory. The utility company has also paid for repairs to a boat owned and operated by the First Nation. Manitoba Hydro says previous claims made by the First Nation on August 26, alleging that the company is still only temporarily loaning 2 small aluminum boats, is inaccurate. The First Nation also alleges that for the past 40 days, Manitoba Hydro hasn't assigned 3 heavy-duty boats on Split Lake to help York Factory. Hydro says again this is not accurate and that 2 floating docks have also been provided to York Factory for assistance. Since the beginning of August, York Factory leadership called for Manitoba Hydro and the province to release water from the Churchill River diversion and Lake Winnipeg to increase the water level in Split Lake and restore the ferry service for York Factory. Manitoba Hydro has previously defended its decision to not release the water in order to supply safe and reliable electricity to all Manitobans. APTN News has tried to contact York Factory leadership, but they have not responded to our requests. However, on Thursday, the nation filed a statement of claim against Manitoba Hydro, the province of Manitoba, and the Attorney General of Canada. We'll bring you more tonight on 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Manitoba RCMP major crimes have made an arrest in the death of a man in Opaskwayak Cree Nation. Last Sunday on August 24th at around 8:50 p.m., the Manitoba First Nation Police Service were called to a home for a deceased male in Opaskwayak. RCMP Major Crimes was then assigned to the investigation, and an autopsy confirmed the death was a homicide. Police say 3 individuals were socializing with the man when an altercation broke out and the 34-year-old male was shot. 27-year-old Wyatt Campbell was later located in Moose Lake last Wednesday and has been charged with second-degree murder, and he has been remanded in custody until his next court appearance. RCMP continued their investigation this week. A man from the Louisville First Nation who was charged with the murder of a man from Ermineskin Cree Nation earlier this month has been located and arrested. 20-year-old Ashton Deschamps was located by RCMP in North Battleford, Saskatchewan on August 19th and arrested. Deschamps was charged with second-degree murder for the death of 31-year-old Chance Twins of Louisville after police responded to a home in Louisville about a firearms complaint. Deschamps will make his next court appearance in Alberta. RCMP did not say where and what day that court appearance will be. It began with a simple ancestry test and ended with an emotional reunion this week. After 5 decades away from Manitoba, Jonathan Hooker, a 60 Scoop survivor, has finally come home. Kyler Minshall reports.
Jonathan Hooker was only 18 months old when, against his family's will, he was taken by the federal government from his home community of Moose Lake and given up to a New Zealand couple for adoption. Hooker spent the majority of his life unaware of his Indigenous heritage, and it wasn't until his mother-in-law gifted him a DNA kit that he learned the truth. Through Facebook, he was able to get in contact with his half-sister, another Scoop survivor living in Texas, and was able to meet her and an uncle there in November of 2024. This Wednesday, Hooker arrived at the Winnipeg International Airport, returning to Manitoba for the first time since 1975 to reunite with his long-lost birth mother, Patsy George.
I'm happy to see my son. I thought I would never see him again. He was only 2 months old when they took him away from me. And my other daughter, a month old. I don't know what they were doing. But I'm happy to see him.
Hooker is just one of the thousands of Indigenous children taken by the federal government between the 1960s and 80s and adopted into predominantly white families in an effort to erase their cultural heritage and assimilate them into Western society. He says that he's excited to learn more about his history and culture. He will be spending his trip visiting family in Winnipeg, Birch River, and his home community of Moose Lake, and he hopes that more Scoop survivors will try to reconnect with their heritage.
I hope somebody gets some inspiration out of this. I hope someone sort of hears some of my story or comes and talks to me or anything, and we can maybe get some advice.
Throughout this process, Jonathan has been supported by fellow Scoop survivor and advocate Colleen Rajat. She says she is happy for Jonathan, but thinks that there should be a permanent repatriation program set up to help 60 Scoop survivors in different countries return home. Kyler Minchell, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
An update now to a story we've been following. This morning, a state of emergency has been declared for another northern community due to wildfires. At 10 a.m. this morning, the Council of Whati in Northwest Territories declared a local state of emergency for the community. All residents are required to evacuate the area immediately due to encroaching wildfires just south of the community. All evacuees must register at the local Whati Cultural Center to receive more information. There are reception centers for evacuees currently being set up in Vichoko and Yellowknife. For more information, residents can go to the GNWT Public Safety website. An Indigenous online airline has signed a an Indigenous-owned airline has signed a landmark agreement worth nearly $500 million. The deal will see Rez Gas provide workforce transportation services for 2 uranium companies in northern Saskatchewan. APTN video journalist Rachel May was at the event and has these details.
So it's a big step change in technology, and that's going to have a big impact for us on our reliability of our services.
Rez Gas CEO Derek Neese says a new 15-year agreement with Cameco and Areno will allow them to expand their fleet and invest in employees. The nearly $500 million deal will also fund Indigenous pilot and airline mechanic programs, while adding 3 brand new planes straight from the factory in France.
These aircraft are much more efficient for us because we can carry on one aircraft 68 passengers, whereas in the past we could only carry 44 passengers on the current aircraft.
Rez Gas is 100% Indigenous owned, with Athabasca Basin Development, Prince Albert Development Corp, and 12 First Nations in the province as shareholders. The company also offers a fully funded Indigenous pilot training program to help candidates from northern Saskatchewan become professional pilots. Neese says partnerships with companies like Cameco and Areno are vital to creating job opportunities for Indigenous people in their own communities.
We want to have a workforce that lives in Saskatchewan, comes from Saskatchewan, and is invested in Saskatchewan. And because we are Indigenous owned, and because we are flying into those northern communities, we've got a commitment that we will increase Indigenous employment.
One of Rez Gas shareholder communities is Black Lake First Nation. Chief Corrine Saizi says she is pleased to see the province's only northern airline expanding to create more opportunities.
So it is an honor, and I am proud of the companies for coming together and making more employment for our communities, to take people to the mine sites for work. So it is a proud moment today.
Dylan Bringleson, Vice President of Supply Chain Management at Cameco, says they are proud to continue exploring business development, community engagement, and employment with northern communities.
But the heart of our company is going to be always with the communities and the people in northern Saskatchewan, trying to find these opportunities.
Rachel May, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
TR Wheatley is up next with this week's new edition of Truth in Politics. Stay with us, we'll be right back. Welcome back. Western Treaty Nations were meeting this week for the 14th annual summit on the Natural Resources Transfer Agreements. Negotiated 95 years ago by the federal government and the three provinces, the NRTA's purpose was to give the provinces of Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta control over Crown land and resources. However, the transfers occurred without any consent from First Nations at the time. That's a topic for this week's Truth in Politics panel. Our TR Wheatley was joined by Jennifer Leywitz, the CEO of Opaskwayak Strategies, and helping us out this week is lawyer Leah Ballantyne.
Thanks to you both for being here. Leah, let's start with you. Can you give us a brief rundown of what the Natural Resource Transfer Agreements are and how they came to be?
Yeah, Tansei, and thank you for having me here today. Really appreciate it. I'm coming to you from the St'elas traditional territory. The NRTA has really been unfinished business with the Constitution of Canada and the rights, the inherent and treaty rights of all First Nations in Canada. How it came about in the 1930s was unilaterally Canada providing a jurisdictional over natural resources to the prairie provinces of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. This was done without any consultation whatsoever to the First Nations, and in my opinion, in breach and violation of our treaties. And I say our, I'm from the Pugatawagan area in the Matthias Cree Nation. We took adhesion to Treaty 6 in 1910. And so our treaties were a nation-to-nation basis. And when the NRTA happened, there was no engagements or consultation whatsoever from any of my family or community members. So this was a unilateral action of the Crown and the right of Canada. Without that consultation, it remains unfinished business constitutionally, and of course ties right into the issues that we're having with C5 and potentially with other litigations that might be coming forward from different First Nations, stemming from the letter from National Chief Cindy Woodhouse addressing specifically the issues of Treaty 6, 7, and 8 in regards to the proposed separation of Alberta.
Absolutely. And Jennifer, you were at the annual NRTA summit this week. What did you hear there?
Oh, there were a lot of really good conversations. You know, the summit was over 4 days, so it started with ceremony, and then for 2.5 days following that, it was a mix of, you know, people from the Office of the Treaty Commissioner, lawyers that brought perspective on how to actually challenge these injustices and challenge the NRTA and what the NRTA actually means in modern context. First Nations chiefs and their approach on how they view the NRTA and what their step forward actually looks like. Especially as we start to hear more and more about resource development and whether or not nations are participating, because some are, which I think, you know, makes the federal government and provincial governments feel like they can just continue to ram things through because they do find that support out there. But one of the biggest conversations that I heard over the last several days were, you know, the importance of protecting treaty rights, that despite how long ago the treaties were signed and negotiated, we have to continue that fight. And it felt like, you know, I left the summit feeling a renewed sense of hope, but not just hope, but a really, really deep sense of responsibility. You know, I'm a direct descendant of one of the people that interpreted and helped sign Treaty 4. So I feel as a young person leaving that, I'm like, oh man, we have our work cut out for us, because these leaders right now are talking about the importance of treaty and where are our young people going with this, and what are we teaching our young people about the protection and advocacy for our treaty rights.
Yeah, you know, Leah, earlier this year, and you mentioned it briefly there, the National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations wrote to Prime Minister Mark Carney calling for a review of the NRTA. Let's talk about that a little bit more. Why is that so important?
Yeah, well, that's unfinished business as far as reconciliation goes, at least Canada's commitment to reconciliation and the calls to action under the TRC. And it was really well articulated, in my opinion, with the Royal Commission on Aboriginal People in the 90s, that publication. And so the Natural Resource Transfer Agreement, because it attracts constitutional laws, and there was no consultation with First Nations, it is a violation of our treaties and it requires redress because C5 is really all about moving the natural resources and projects that are deemed in the national interest. So in order to advance even Bill C5, you're absolutely going to need to have the voice and the jurisdiction and respecting those treaty and inherent rights of First Nations at the table, first and foremost. Without that, Canada is going to be stymied with litigation of all sorts. And I understand that these issues were raised to the national chief. So she, in fact, wrote that letter to Prime Minister Carney regarding the NRTA. And so this is really unfinished business, and it is a constitutional question that impacts all Canadians, because if the treaty rights of First Nations are violated, there is the potential to violate any other rights under the Constitution of Canada, including the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So I do believe that this is a very salient issue for all First Nations and indeed all Canadians.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds coming up here. Jennifer, what's next for the Western Treaty Nations and the NRTA?
Well, yesterday the transfer of the Sacred Bundle happened, and so it'll be moving on to a community in Alberta. And that means, next year there's going to be a new summit in a new place. But one thing, interestingly enough, I have heard being discussed more and more, and it kind of ties into the conversation of what we're seeing out of Manitoba with the non-confidence vote that some of these nations want to see against the Grand Chief, because they feel as though some of these overarching bodies are essentially making decisions on behalf of the rights holders. That was a big conversation that I was hearing at the tables I was sitting at with chiefs I were talking to, some of the little more grassroots level advocacy that's coming out. So I think what we're going to see is not just a summit happening again, but also more and more grassroots representation on behalf of the rights holders and advocating for treaty, because we're starting to see some of these nations almost break away from these overarching bodies. And when we're hearing about non-confidence votes and we're hearing about people questioning, how capable is the AFN at having the ability to, represent all of these vast different treaties, the treaties 1 to 11 especially, I think we're going to see a lot more grassroots involvement, especially at a nation level.
Jennifer and Leah, thank you. We'll have to leave it there. We're going to be discussing resolution coming to the AFN next week over on the podcast. Thanks to you both.
Thanks.
Thank you.
There's a new Indigenous play in Ontario that is selling out fast. Annette Francis with that story after the break. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Fredericton 19, Halifax 20 and sunny there. Nain 18, Cartwright 20 and sunny. Sun's out in Saguenay at 14, Quebec City partly cloudy and 16. Toronto 15, Sarnia 16. Sudbury 14, Thunder Bay 14 as well and sunny. Thompson 20, God's Lake 24. 20 in Gimli, Winnipeg 21 and sunny. Rain in Swift Current at 17, sunny in Yorkton at 20. Uranium City 19, Stony Rapids 18, and 29 in Fort Chipewyan. 33 in Medicine Hat, Calgary 30. 16 in Tofino, smoky there, Victoria smoky as well in 15. Prince Rupert 14, Smithers 21. 12 in Mayo, Dawson 14. Whati 22 and sunny, Fort Simpson 21. Sax Harbor 1, Polituck 7. 14 in Baker Lake, Chesterfield 9 and partly cloudy. And Arctic Bay -3 and rain, Aglulik +2. A First Nation musician has just found a new niche in the theatre industry. His first musical production called Rez Gas kicked off in Port Hope, Ontario, and tickets are selling fast. Here's Annette Francis with that story.
The covers and hold me tight. Wish with me for
Kel Crow is confident anytime he has a guitar in his hand. He's been on the music scene entertaining audiences for the past 15 years. He jumped out of his comfort zone after being asked to participate in a theater project 3 years ago.
Kind of insane, actually. When I started this project, I thought that the whole process was going to be done and over with in a year with a reading here in the theater. And when it was over, I remember thinking like, wow, that was a really great time of my life, like time to move on, and what a great experience. And then, a week later, I got the call that we were going to do it for real. And I was like, oh, all right.
He's thankful for the push and the support of co-worker Genevieve Adam.
I was sort of the one kind of just staring off into space, having ideas, and Genevieve was the one sort of, I've said this before, but catching them in a butterfly net kind of thing and turning them into something, tangible and real.
Rez Gas is now on stage at the Capitol Theatre. The lead character is Destin, who left his reserve in search of something better. He unexpectedly ends up back there after having car trouble. It all plays out at the Wide Wigwam Diner. Destin is played by John Walmsley. It's been 10 years since he has done musical theater. He says the production bridges many gaps.
A very heartfelt experience to feel like I'm coming home. I feel like there's a part of me that is being, I don't know, it's just a part of me that feels like it was missing, and now it's kind of creating this whole picture for me.
Crow says some of the inspiration came from his own experience.
A lot of it came from within, I think. Like our main character goes through a lot of the emotions that I felt when I moved back to Alderville, for sure, especially doing what I do and relative to people's perception of what it is to be a musician and to make it, as it were. So I think, yeah, some of it's going to be autobiographical for people that know me, and some of it's going to feel new, or like maybe they didn't know me as well as they thought they did.
The musical crosses a few genres in music, including rock, hip-hop, and of course there's comedy.
We have really funny humor. We have really intense moments of emotion. We have moments of anger and hope and all of these different things. And I wanted it to be a piece where, we can say as much as we want about the overall culture, but we wanted it to be coming from a very personal, moment in this sort of like slice of life for these characters. And I think that we've achieved that and then some.
According to Crow, tickets are selling fast. Rez Gas runs until September 7th. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Port Hope, Ontario.
Already the last Friday of August, and Fridays means we have a new episode of Val National tonight at 6:30 p.m. right after the national news. Host Kim Sullivan joins us now. Tanse Kim.
Hey, we have a jammed pack show this Friday. 2 stories out of Ganawage, 2 out of Nunavik, and I must say, all positive and happy stories to end this week. However, what's not so happy is proposed Bill 97. That, as you know, hot topic in Quebec. The regional chief of the Association of First Nations Quebec Labrador actually sits down with us. You don't want to miss it. It's happening at 6:30 Eastern tonight. On se voit ce soir.
And that's your daytime newscast for this Friday. TR Wheatley is back in a few hours with your evening newscast. Please join us then. From all of us at APTN National News, hi miigwech masi cho. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again next Tuesday. Have a safe weekend with family. Ekse.